And welcome to the European Parliament in Brussels for Talking Europe on France 24. In Denmark, unlike other EU member states such as France and the United Kingdom, returning jihadists are not treated as criminals but as citizens who need to be rehabilitated into the community. Dubbed Jihad Rehab, Denmark's de-radicalisation scheme was launched nationwide last autumn. But critics say that the recent Copenhagen shootings show that the program is a setback, and they call for a more punitive approach to returning fighters. Well, I've invited two MEPs, one from Denmark and one from the United Kingdom. They'll tell me how Europe must address this problem. In the second part of the show, I'll be joined by Neven Mimica. He's the EU Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development. The European Union remains the world's biggest aid donor. Christel Schaldemose, welcome to Talking Europe. You're a Danish MEP from the group of Socialists and Democrats. At home you belong to the same party as Danish Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt. Your country has one of Europe's highest rates of jihadi fighters, and we all know that Copenhagen was recently rocked by two deadly shootings. Also with us, David Campbell-Bannerman, you're from the United Kingdom. You belong to the group of Conservatives and Reformists. At home you belong to the Tories. This is the party of British Prime Minister David Cameron, who has a very strong approach towards jihadists. You'll tell us more later. Mrs. Schaldemose, what do you do with a person who returns home after going to fight in Iraq or Syria? Do you lock him up or do you send him to a rehabilitation center?
Well, we are trying to see what we can do in order to make sure that these persons returning from Syria not possess a threat to the society. But we also think that we need to be able to prove that they have in fact been fighting as a foreign fighter, and that makes it difficult for us to lock them up. So what we're trying to do is to do something to get them back into society and make sure that they don't possess a threat to the society.
What would you respond, Mr. Campbell-Bannerman? Do you believe that the Danish approach is the right one?
No, I don't. I mean, our approach is obviously much tougher. We think these people have crossed the line. There's 600 British citizens fighting for ISIS at the moment, which is outrageous. We have a much tougher approach. We try and stop people going. We actually can take away their passports before going. And when they come back and they've been engaged in fighting, I accept it's difficult sometimes to prove this, then they should face charges. I mean, what you do when they're in jail is a different matter. But I do think you need to detain them first, and then maybe a bit of rehabilitation within jail.
We're going to watch a short report on the Danish experience in a moment, but let me ask you the impact of the recent shootings in Copenhagen, at the cultural center, at the synagogue. Have people changed their mind? Do they believe that these rehabilitation programs haven't worked?
Well, what we have seen in Denmark is in fact, maybe people were shocked but not surprised by the fact that we saw these shootings. I mean, it's 10 years ago the first Mohammed drawings were shown, and we were part of that. And we know for many years that we have been, how do you say it, in risk of seeing an attack.
A target.
Yeah. So therefore we might not be that surprised, but of course shocked. But what happens now is that we're trying to discuss what to do to prevent new attacks. But I think we have a balanced approach. Of course, we're talking about being tough on crimes, so to speak, tough on terrorists. We need to give the authorities, the police, etc., better tools, even maybe further things they can do in order to survey these people we seen as risk groups. But at the same time, we're trying to do and discuss what can we do to make sure that we don't see that these young, angry men get radicalized, either when they are in prison or just being a part of the society. So we are trying to do both. So therefore I think we have a double strategy, so to speak. One being tough and the other being soft, because I think we need both solutions in order to protect the society. But we also say that it is difficult to promise the citizens that we can prevent all kind of attacks. I mean, he was a lonely person, and he was angry and he just started shooting.
But he had a violent history, that's what the Prime Minister said. He spent some time in prison. I want to talk about prisons, because that's usually where a number of these men get radicalized. So my question, if you lock returning fighters up, don't you risk further radicalizing them in prison?
Well, obviously that's a matter for the prison authorities, and it is a serious issue. You know, you see it with terrorists. You know, you don't want them being trained. I accept all of that. But, you know, I think you need a tough response to this because the numbers are getting quite large. As I say, 600 already fighting for ISIS. It might be a lot more. Of course, it's not just men, it's women. We're missing 3 female 16-year-olds.
Absolutely. Apparently currently in Syria.
Currently in Syria. I mean, I'd like to see more action. It's very relevant to that case, it seems, that apparently the Twitter has failed to close down accounts for 60 or 70 extremists. And these girls, allegedly, were following these tweets. It encouraged them to take off. They should have been stopped at the border. There was an issue there. But it is very concerning. And I think, you know, the internet side of this, which is very important to these extremists, has to be looked at. I should say, you know, my full sympathy is with the Danish people. Those were terrible attacks.
It was.
And we all face the same threat.
Well, known as Jihad Rehab, Denmark's de-radicalisation program offers a number of Danish fighters social support without the threat of jail time. Our Copenhagen correspondent Malcolm Brabant brought us this report.
Long live Sharia law, shout supporters of an extreme Islamist group, taunting their Danish opponents.
Sharia is part of Islam, and that's what we're fighting for, Islam.
Police have to separate the radicals from Danes protesting against the extremists. Get out, this is my country, shouts the old man, as the police try to keep the peace.
Denmark is too soft on them. They should not even be here. That's my own opinion. They should not be here because they're racists. That's what they are. Sharia is based on racism, fascism, everything. This should not be here in Denmark.
Denmark is a comparatively small country, but a disproportionately large number of young Danes are going to fight in Syria, and the authorities are desperate to stop the growing radicalization of young Muslims. This is a recruiting video for the so-called Islamic State organization, and the key figure is the 21-year-old Dane to the right of the picture, a Christian convert with learning difficulties called Victor Christensen. After appealing to his Danish brothers and sisters to join Jihad, Victor blew himself up in a suicide attack. But fellow fighters who come back to Denmark can get help to find work or return to education as part of a state-backed rehabilitation program.
We don't roll out the red carpet, but we are there to try to help them reintegrate into the society, because we believe that is the most secure thing we can do in order to protect the society from these young people becoming even more radicalized.
The rehabilitation project was devised by Professor Preben Bertelsen, a psychologist from Aarhus University. He believes Denmark's generous approach towards the fighters helps to neutralize the threat.
Maybe they went off with a romantic idea about making a difference, but they've seen things that which made them disappointed. It would be stupid and also dangerous if we not develop programs taking them home and to de-radicalize them and reintegrate them in the society.
Mrs. Scheldemose, despite a recent attack against a synagogue and a cultural center in Copenhagen, do you have strong evidence that this rehabilitation program does work?
Well, at least we have seen from Aarhus that they succeeded in preventing young men and women from going to Syria. So it works, at least in the sense that they are not going to fight with IS. So I think it has a very good impact. But of course we need to do more, and not just in Aarhus, the city where they did this and had success with it. So I think we need to do more. But I think that we need, as I said before, both doing something to prevent young people from getting radicalized and stop them from going on to Syria and to fight there. But we also have to do something for those who already has become radicalized and criminals and trying to, threaten the society. So, we have in fact a combination, both the tough one, I suppose, and the soft one. And I think those two ways of tackling it is important. You cannot do it only by the soft way or only by the hard way, but it is difficult, and the government has just put aside a lot of money in order to do even more in this respect, especially, for instance, in the jails, how to prevent radicalization there. Maybe by isolating the prisoners enlighten them also.
Authorities in Aarhus, Denmark's second largest city, say that since the program was put in place, they've managed to almost stop the number of local people heading to Syria. Does Britain have similar schemes?
Yes, we do. We do try and influence the families. We try to trace people and to head them off. I think that, before they commit the crimes, before they cross literally, metaphorically as well, cross the boundary, once they go to Syria and fight, I think that is treason, against our interests as a country, the people of the country. But, before then, they should be influenced. But what's scary, there was a case recently in the UK where someone's been convicted of a Lee Rigby type murder, of going to try and behead someone on British streets. But they were radicalized, allegedly, within 2 months, maybe 3 at the utmost. But that is scary, how fast these targets can be radicalized.
Now, we've looked at the soft approach. You say that Denmark is also using, or at least hoping to use, other tools. I'd like to address a number of them. Confiscating passports. Does that work? Is that something you would support?
Well, we are discussing it at the moment, and personally, I think that it is important to do that, to confiscate it if we have a kind of an idea that this young person would travel to abroad to fight with IS. And then I think we should do it, because that's a clear signal sending to them that we don't want them to do it. And I must also say that we see parents asking the authorities to do things like that, because they are also afraid of their young people going abroad to fight. So I think it is definitely a tool.
And that is apparently what happened in France, by the way, very recently. Parents
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think it is important to stop them. And as you say, a lot of the families want them stopped. They're appealing to the authorities for help. And of course, if you stop them at that stage, they haven't really committed a crime much. I mean, they may be in their heads. But I think the moment they become radicalized, they go across the boundaries, they sign up to fight for ISIS in some shape or form. I think that is very dangerous territory, and it's a long way back from there to actually, to reconvert them back to normality.
Mr. Campbell-Bannerman, you earlier mentioned Twitter, how these teenagers in Britain used the social network. The French Interior Minister travelled to San Francisco last weekend to meet officials at Google, Facebook and Twitter. He basically urged them to cooperate with the French government. Do you believe that there's a problem there?
I do. I think they are quite libertarian in attitude. They don't want controls. They're obviously, they're beyond nations. I mean, they're very international in their setup. Their servers can be in America but serve Europe. I think they need to show more responsibility, or there will be legislation, there will be a crackdown, whether it's through the EU or through nation states. And I think the sympathy for them is now shifting towards a tougher stance, because the threat is very real, and they need to be more responsible about how they approach this. They are a communication source being used by terrorists and actually encouraging people to get involved in this terrorist battle against us.
Danish people are also known to be quite libertarian. Are they ready to accept that sort of controls? The state basically asking information from Facebook, asking those social networks to remove information?
Well, I think the Danish people quite open-minded at the moment to find new ways of tackling this challenge we face. Also asking Google and Facebook and others to play an active role. But of course, I also need to say that, of course, it's discussed. I mean, we have a lot of political debates about how far should we go, what kind of society are we creating while trying to prevent a new terrorist attack. And mass surveillance is some of the things that people are saying no to. But surveillance of these, extremists, those groups that might possess a threat to the society, they are more open towards. We have trust in the authorities, in the society, in the police. So therefore, normally we try to say if you don't have anything to hide, you don't have to be threatened by the fact that the society.
You shouldn't be afraid.
You shouldn't be afraid. But we haven't found the final solution on how to tackle this. So we are really discussing a lot of things at the moment, and time will show where we end up.
And it's about finding the right balance, I believe, between civil liberties and security. A very difficult equation indeed. Christel Scheldemose, David Campbell-Bannerman, thank you so much for taking part in the first part of Talking Europe. Now, please stay with me. I'll return just after the news break in about 10 minutes on France 24. I'll bring you an interview with Neven Mimica. He's the EU Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development.